the information in some sort of reporting. And then we look to continuous quality improvement. You get a deeper understanding of what it is you're doing, and then you make program adjustments. So we see it as a whole system, and the apparatus is sitting on your theory of change. And the theory of change is, what do I think I'm doing, and why do I think it's going to make a difference? And so that's also something that, as part of evaluation, that may be something that evolves. And then the participatory, there's little people all over the place. That's for the participatory, and we just see at every step of the way we want our principles to show. Okay. So another concept that we really, really emphasize in the Institute is mission time. And we have sent you gave us a mailing address. We have ordered, and you should receive in the next week or so, this particular book, which is called the Social Profit Handbook. And it has two really important concepts in it. One is mission time, and the other is rubrics, which I'm going to put off talking about. But I want to tell you a little bit about how we came to use this book. So I and another staff member met with someone from the Maddox Foundation, and they were really interested in the evaluation lab. And after we met with this man, he sent us this book, each of us this book. And we're like, what is this? Why did this guy send us reading? We were actually annoyed, which I don't know. We shouldn't have been annoyed. It was a gift. It turns out it was a wonderful gift. And so we both read the book, and we were like, oh my God, this book is amazing, because we were really struggling with, how are we going to teach other organizations to do evaluation? Because the key thing is that they need to, it's like, the key thing for me is like discipline. You need to have discipline so that you sit down and actually do evaluation. And we had the same problem. We loved helping organizations do evaluation, but we weren't so good about doing our own evaluation. The shoemaker's child, his children are running around without shoes on. And this changed everything for us. The idea of mission time changed everything. Mission time is basically when you get to focus on your mission. And many of us in our programs are running the day-to-day and really excited about what we're doing, but we don't take the time to think about what we're doing intentionally, or to reflect on what we're doing, or to try to think about, take just some time to stop and think. When we started calling our evaluation meetings, or when we were doing our own evaluation, mission time, all of a sudden when I saw mission time on my calendar, I wanted to go. And so it was just a reframing of the idea of, what is evaluation about? It's about meeting your mission, and it made it something that we wanted to do. So I wanted to share that story, because just asking you to set aside mission time, for us anyway, it was transformative. And then we were like, oh, now we know how to get organization. Now we know how we can really help organizations, because now we know how to do it ourselves. So that was, thank you to the person who sent us that book. So what is mission time, or why is evaluation mission time? So one of the key features is that we want you to have a reflection work. If you've ever worked with an external evaluator, they are wonderful, right? Because they're like, hey, we've got to do the evaluation. Like, it's on there. That's what they do. And so they're like setting up meetings and so on, and they provide that structure for you, which is so valuable. But we can't always have an external evaluator all the time. And so having mission time means that we're going to be doing this work. It's going to be incorporated into what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so, one way is just to always have some kind of mission time set aside. And another way to do it, that the organizations that we've worked with have also done to provide that structure, is to have an internal evaluation team that meets regularly. And then this last point here about mission time brings joy. It does. So that's the crazy thing about evaluation, is that, I was just saying to my small group, like, no one wants to be evaluated. But in fact, if evaluation is done as part of mission, it actually, it literally brings joy. So that's what you have to look forward to. So I want to share this. This is from Covey, Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so he has these quadrants. So the top row is things that are important, and the bottom row is not important. And then the first column is things that are urgent. I can't see it. I'm urgent and not urgent. And so you definitely want to be in the top row, right, where things are important. But there are things that aren't urgent that are really, really important. That it's, again, without mission time, it's hard to figure out how to set aside time to make that happen. And so in the second quadrant, where something is important but not necessarily urgent, you have proactive work, important goals, creative thinking, planning and prevention, relationship building, learning and renewal, and recreation. And then if we go to my next slide, that's really, mission time clearly belongs right there, and evaluation in that second quadrant. So it's a really helpful way of thinking about that this thing is really important. We know it's important. And then setting aside mission time makes it so that we can actually do it. Okay. So again, just going back to what this is all about and what the commitment is, I've circled the mission time. And when we add up all the hours, this would be for the year, you would be devoting, each person on your evaluation team, a little over a week of work to evaluation. And that's fantastic. That is a great goal, to have that kind of focus in an ongoing way. So it's not in a panicked way. It's not in like, I have to pull something together. We're setting aside the time to make this happen. So that is pretty cool. Let me stop there and see if people have questions. And you can raise your hand. You don't have to put a Q in. If you raise your hand, you go to the upper left corner of my screen. All right, well, I'm going to say that there are no questions. All right, and I think what's happening next is a break. Okay, so this is a 15-minute break. If you can just turn off your camera and turn on your mute, and then we'll just see you back here at 2 o'clock. And if you have any questions, I can hang around for about 5 minutes, so you can just ask me. I'm going to be recording the main sessions, so that may be helpful for your colleagues to review. Okay, so I'm going to present for about a half hour on logic models. And so let's just go ahead and start in with that. So the objectives of the session are to understand what it is and why it's so useful, to distinguish between outputs and outcomes, which is an important distinction, to gain clarity and confidence for creating or refining a logic model for your program, and to begin the process of creating or refining your logic model. So it's absolutely, we don't expect people to have logic models, but if you do, this is a great opportunity to revisit it. Okay. Again, if you already have a logic model, we want to encourage you to take a second look at it, and with your colleagues, have a conversation about if it's getting used. And then we'd also really like you to share when we have sharing in the small groups. So a logic model, simply put, is a one-page description of your program And it shows the connection between the day-to-day activities, resources, your outcomes, and your mission. And it can be, it's often a table, but it can be, I've seen many different kinds of logic models, how they're presented. And the main thing about it, or one of the key things about it, is that it should be a living document. You want to be using it and you want to be updating it. Okay, so they're awesome. Why are they so awesome? This is really, they are so incredibly useful. So one of the ways in which they're useful is it gives you a shared vision. And so, and the statement just says, if you're using it and reviewing it by all of your stakeholders, everyone knows what the program is and what you're working toward. A second reason why it's so useful is it tells you what you need to evaluate. It tells you exactly what you care about, exactly what you're hoping to see. And it also, it is a tool in helping you figure out how to become even more effective. The third one is that it communicates your program and very succinctly to the public and funders. And then logic, we've had organizations working on a new program where they're like, oh, wait a minute. It really helps you think through very carefully what you're trying to do and how. And I'm just showing this evaluation system picture again, just to emphasize that the logic model, the logic model is really the starting point. That's what we need before we can even do anything. So we're going to show you a standard logic model elements. So that includes resources and inputs, activities, outputs, short and long-term outcomes. And it also includes your description of your beliefs and barriers. So the assumptions that you're making about why you think your program is going to work. And then also the external factors, things that you can't control, that may be barriers, and so on. And I'm going to go through, here's a logic model that I'm going to go through in a very simple program, which is to host a birthday party, just to give you a really clear idea about what each column is about, what each element is. So the resources are what you need on hand to do the program. And so for a birthday party, you need someone to host it. You need someone to have their birthday. You need a venue or a space, you need cake, you need tables and chairs, and so on. And so these are all the things you can think about. A logic model is like a list of what you need to do your program, a list of activities, what you're going to do. And so for this birthday party, we're definitely going to be eating, singing happy birthday and cutting the cake, opening gifts, beating the piñata, and so on. And now we get to outputs. So what do we mean by outputs? Outputs, you can think about outputs as the evidence that you did the activities. So did people come? How many people came? Did they bring gifts? What was available for the guests to do when they got there? How much food was left over? So those are all things that you can count, that are numbers. But there are other outputs, other evidence that you're doing your activity that may be qualitative. So engagement, were people engaged in the activity? Were they dancing? Were they doing the activity? Were they enthusiastic? That could also be an output, something that shows that the activity was happening. And then another output here is atmosphere. Was it welcoming and comfortable? So that's outputs. And then the thing that we really focus on a lot in evaluation is the outcomes. Did the program change people? Did it affect people? And so we define short term, it would be at the end of the program, and then long term, sometime into the future. And you can define the future however you like. But so for the outcomes, the short term outcomes, we have that the person has felt special and happy at the end of the day, and that the attendees had a good time. And long-term might be that the person remembers the event fondly, and that the party was salient for people and that they got good ideas and then, they did something with it. So those are the four main groupings. And then down at the bottom, we have assumptions. So what are the assumptions that we have to make for this party to have the outcomes that we're hoping for? Well, one assumption is that this is people will think that this is a good idea, that it's culturally appropriate to celebrate a birthday in this way. An assumption is that the person wants to be the center of attention. That may not be always the case. And that also that you're doing something that people will enjoy. So those are some assumptions for a birthday party. And then the external factors could be, this pandemic, which is often throwing a wrench into our plans. If people have food allergies, if there's a conflict with this day, and so on. Okay, so I want to go through these pieces one at a time, but I want to start with outcomes. And we're going to encourage you to start with outcomes when you either review your logic model or create or just starting from scratch and thinking about what the outcomes are. So typically these are going to be changes in participant behavior or attitudes, change in their knowledge or knowledge and skills that they've gained, change in the level of functioning, change in an outlook. And one of the things that we like to think about in the organizations that we've worked with is there a way in which, if this is the goal of your organization, that you've really changed someone's life in some way? So is their life trajectory a little bit different, or maybe a lot different because of your program? And so what are outcomes? The outcomes are the evidence that your program is making a difference. And we're going to ask you to start with those, because typically you know what you want to happen. So we think that those are a good way to start. And again, the short-term outcomes are what you can measure on the last day of the program. And the long-term outcomes are things that you want participants to carry into the future. And so those are just repeated from the birthday logic model. The next one is resources, and those are the things and people that you need to operate your program. And so in general, that's going to be space, funding, staff, training, anything that you need to have on hand before anyone walks in the door to do your program. Those are your resources. And so again, those are repeated for the birthday. Then we have activities. So what you're doing when your program is happening. Are there classes? Is there counseling? Are there home visits? Are there events? And this also tends to be something that it's very easy for most organizations to list what it is that they're doing to describe their program. And then the outputs. So this is where I just want to, focus on what do we mean by an output? The output, again, is the evidence that you did what you said you were going to do. The outcomes are different. Did it make a difference? We don't know. But the outputs are the evidence that you did what you said you were going to do. And it's really important to document these as well. How many participants were there? How many events did you do? How many meals did you serve? And then also it can be things like engagement and trust built. And sometimes organizations think about these as intermediates, like intermediate steps to getting to your outcome. Like we must get engaged and we must build trust, for example. Okay. And I do want to emphasize that these can be things that you count, and they can also be more qualitative, things that you'd like to see, or things that would be a result of your activities. Okay. And again, just to see those side by side, the outputs are like, hey, you did something, you did your program, and the outcomes are your program changed people. It made a difference. Okay, so what I want to do now is I'm going to go through the assumptions and the stuff underneath, like the stuff that's underlying your logic model. So the assumptions are the beliefs you have about what will work and why. And so when you are developing a program, this is really where the logic comes in. a bit. Like, what is it? Why do you think that if you do your activities, that you'll get the outcomes that you want to get? And I'm going to show you some examples from real organization models that I think will help emphasize what it is that we're looking for in this box. And then the last thing is external factors or barriers. What might limit or be an obstacle to success? And so these are things that are out of your control that may make it harder for your program to do what it said. And again, I'm going to go through some examples that I think make this stand out. But here it is again. I'm just going to give you a moment to put that together. And I'm going to stop briefly to see if people have questions yet. Are there questions? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
My project, I guess, is less of a program and more of an initiative that could go beyond, hopefully it'll go beyond the 2 years of the grant. So I'm just kind of wondering about how that factors in if it's not tied to a time frame.
So that's fine. I mean, I think that logic models are helpful for, like, the birthday party was going to end right in a week or, a couple of weeks. So the thing about putting together a logic model is that it's going to let you really plan out. It's really a planning document too. So you can say, okay, I have a logic model for my initiative. I think that will work perfectly. Other questions? Okay, so let me go back, and I think that this is really going to be driven home with some of the real organization examples. Okay, so we're gonna the link, which Caitlin, if you could share that again. There's a link where you can find the templates, and what we're going to be doing in the next part of the workshop is you're going to be starting to fill out a template. So this is one that you can start with. It's got the inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, and then the assumptions and external factors down at the bottom. And here's an example of a logic model, and these are also available to you at that link. I think it says examples of logic models. And so this is for a program for an organization in Albuquerque called Enlace Comunitario. And it's the logic model for the prevention programs. And so I'm going to give you a chance just to study this, to look through it. And they have some arrows here that show what's connected to what. And for some organizations, it really makes sense. And so you can see that they've got two programs here, a youth program and a promotores program. And so they basically separated those out. Okay. So let's look at what their outcomes are. So some of it, in the short term, they have improved understanding of domestic violence. And then in the long run, there's social norms, change social norms that accept gender inequality. And so this is a good example of, an actual real logic model. They have some assumptions here down at the bottom that domestic violence survivors are the best change agents to prevent future domestic violence. And they decided not to do any external factors. Okay. Here's another template without any arrows, which is also available to you. These are in Word format so that you can just add to them. It's just got the list. You make a list and then you add them here. And let me show you an example of this. Okay, so here's a logic model for, this was a number of organizations. We're going to provide a place for youth to gather. And so one of the things I want to point out about this logic model is that it doesn't exactly follow the template, and that's perfectly fine. We want you to have a logic model, a one page document that is your program. And so it's up, you can absolutely be creative. What does it have? Well, it has the resources and inputs here, and there's a lot of them. But here's the activities, and they separated the activities into different categories. So they wanted youth to have access to safety and basic needs. And then they're looking at relationships, mastery, and empowerment. And so this incorporates into the logic model itself the progression that they are hoping to see by providing a space for youth to get to connect with each other. And so you can see that in the activities, they have different things going. So part of their activities are, I'm sorry, I want to see if my arrow, yeah, okay. So the nurtured heart approach is one of their activities. Therapeutic supports, promoting positive culture. And so these are things that they're going to be doing in the youth center. They're basically activities. And if we go to outputs, we have number of youth, number referred. And then we have things that are qualitative, positive relationship and engagement, supportive, inclusive, and safe environment. And so these are things that they're looking to come out of their activities. And then what are the outcomes? The outcomes are things like there's a decrease in youth homelessness. Youth develop their own goals and path for the future. Youth know their rights, and so on. So they have a long list of outcomes that they're hoping to see. What's this up here? Well, they want to have a youth advisory council, and it's so important. It has its own box. So this is just so that you know, you get, basically, you want this, you want activities, you want outputs and outcomes, and there's many other things that you can include or organize according to what makes sense for your program. Okay, so to get started, we'd like you to choose a single program or an initiative or your whole organization. You decide. And today we're hoping that you make a list of outcomes, and if there's time, that you also do a list of activities and outputs. During your mission time this month, we're hoping that you go through the logic model in your 1.5 to 2 hour meeting and make some progress on it. So there's just a little asterisk here that says it may be aspirational, and we're not looking at you to finish anything. We're looking at you to engage in the process. Okay, so what's going to happen now? Let me check the time. Okay, this is good. You'll have a little bit more time. But what we're going to do is I'm going to take some questions first. But let me do that. Let me take some questions. No, let me tell you what you're going to do, and then we'll ask questions. So in a few minutes, we're going to put you into breakout rooms again. And then from those breakout rooms, we're looking for you to, if you're with your colleagues in person, leave the breakout room and work on the logic model, or you can use your own mode of working together online. If you have to leave the Zoom meeting, that's fine. But during that time, the facilitators will be in the breakout room. And if you have questions, you can come back and ask them. Then there'll be, we have a 10-minute break scheduled. And then after that, we're going to come together and share with each other in the small groups our outcomes. And then we'll repeat that process with activities and outputs, if that seems to be appropriate for the groups. I think that what I'd like to do now is break for questions. If you have questions about what you're being asked to do, or if you have any questions about logic models, comments about logic models, I'd like to hear from you. Sorry about the sun. It's really, should do something about that.
I have a question. This is Malin from YouthWorks.
Yes, Lynn.
I have an organizational logic model. Can I pull that back up and work on that? My staff are going to join in a little while, and it would be really great to have them looking at it with fresh eyes, because it's something I developed maybe 2 years ago that gets updated by me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, I want to stress that we do not want to tell you what to work on. We want to provide the tools. And that sounds like a perfect step for your organization. It's really up to you. You decide. You decide how best. This is your mission time. You decide how best to use it. So I think that if you already have a logic model, yes, having other people look at it, great idea. And we have found that every time we sit down with stakeholders, we get different ideas about how to improve our logic models. So looking forward to hearing how that goes. Other questions about what you're being asked to do, or any comments you want to make about logic models that you've known
I do
and
have a
loved?
question.
Yes.
If you,
Right.
I'm curious why your order of doing this is not send us off with our group for 2 days and then come back to do this. Why you're doing this in this compressed time as part of the larger session? What's the gain for doing that?
So the idea is that if anyone gets, it's basically that you have help along the way. So we're looking, like, for example, sending you off to do the outcomes first. That's going to be a list of outcomes. And then we'll get together in our groups and you'll say, oh, maybe you'll get ideas from each other. And so we find that by breaking it up into little pieces, we just learn more about it. And then, we are asking you to go off, for next month, in between this session and next month's session, to work on it more. But we are looking to have a conversation, and also to help folks that aren't necessarily know about logic models to really understand, like, okay, that to feel like, yeah, I can do this. We want you to feel like you can do this. Other questions? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint just because it has a little bit more guidance on what we're asking you to do. And I also want to go and show you that if you go to that link, and the way that I go to it, since I don't have the link bookmarked, is I go to evallab.unm.edu. And from there, you can click on Eval Institutes. And from there, you can go to that will also get you to the website. And today's materials, here are the templates. That's going to be a Word document that you can download and work with. And then the examples. And actually, I think it would be worthwhile I want to just show you a couple more examples that are in that file. So this is a logic model for the New Mexico batterer intervention programs. And you can see that the use of color, they've got different people who are involved in the resources and inputs, activities and outputs. So we have partners, providers, and the state. So otherwise, it's pretty standard. And here, what's interesting about this one, the other ones I showed you didn't have external factors. This one has a tremendous amount of external factors. So this program is a 52-week psychoeducational program in a group setting. And so there's a lot of constraints on a program like that to change someone's behavior, especially a domestic violence offender. And so the group that created this logic model was very, very concerned that that people looking at their program understood that there's a lot of barriers to this program working. So you can take a look at that. I don't know if it would relate to your program or not. And then this is a logic model for PB&J. And again, just to show you how different organizations see themselves differently, we've got all kinds of crazy arrows going all over the place. And that's because that's what made sense for this organization. We also see that activities, they also added their strategy, their approach. So the idea is that everything that matters needs to show up in your document. So you have access to those. And then going back to the what's going to happen, just so that you're really clear on this, try to make this little graphic. So Caitlin's going to invite you to go into the breakout room. Go into the breakout room. Your facilitator will be there. You can go out and work with your colleagues, but you can pop back in with questions. So even if you have to leave the Zoom meeting, you can go back in. You can go back into the breakout room and ask your question. And then at 3:05, so this is an important time, at 3:05, we want you to come back in, and the 4 organizations in your group are going to share the work that they did. Okay. Questions? Okay, so yeah, we're right at about 2:30. So you'll see your facilitator. You can get clarification there as well. And also, Caitlin is always in the main room. If you have any questions about where you should be at any point in time. Okay.
Do you want me to open those breakout rooms now?
All right, everyone's coming back in. Let me, I'm gonna guide us with some slides, but really what I want to do in this session is just hear, like, if something came up that you want to share. So, sorry, that's a side conversation on my screen right now. Where am I? Okay. All right. So what we want to do now is just for the last 20 minutes, spend a little bit of time debriefing, a little bit of time just remembering what's coming next, and then asking you for some feedback. So I will start with the debrief. We don't really need the slide for this, so I think it'd be better if we could see each other. Let me stop the share. Anything come up that anyone would like to talk about? Perhaps the Questa people, if you wouldn't mind sharing what you shared with me.
I'm just gonna do it this way. Yeah, are we in the camera?
You are. You're doing a great job.
Okay. Great. We just had sort of an experience when we were working on the outcomes, I think. And one of the Questa Farmers Market volunteers stopped by this little office where we're sitting. And we were trying to share with her what we're working on. And we were finding like the language, like logic models and shareholders or stakeholders, like having to define the terms was a barrier. Was, just in like us having that conversation where it felt like we were just understanding what we're talking about. And really, it's just a question to everybody. If there are other ways that we might be titling, labeling, other words we'd be using, so that a tool like this is more easy to share in a community with all different people.
Yeah, more accessible colloquial language for the logic model and some of the definitions within that description, so that we don't lose the specificity, but we gain accessibility.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting that y'all had that question. In our group, we also had that question come up, the Explora team. So as you guys know, a lot of the work they do is with youth. And so I'm gonna ask them if they would like to share some of the ideas that they had or some of the thoughts that they had about that, you know, accessibility of language.
You know, to that end, I would just, it's sort of posing a comment and a question. The question is, can we equate logic models with a theory of change model? And are they one and the same? Is it two different names for the same thing? Because I don't know the answer to that question. And if so, I mean, in my mind, that's what a logic model is. It's right. It's an intended change that I want to see. And so that I'm almost thinking about the idea of accessible language intended change, right? We have a start and we have an end, and there's a variety of changes that happen along the way. So I'll throw that out there as a question.
Claudia, did you want to respond?
So in two parts. So to the first question about how to communicate with the community, I can just share an experience with a project that the evaluation lab had so last year. The organization, because they wanted the logic model not just as an internal document, but they wanted it for the families they work with and their children. So they developed the logic model as an infographic, and the way they present it is as a brochure. Where a lot of the things that were expressed in words during the team meetings were translated into images. So there is the communication tool that did get translated, and then there was the internal document that was the logic model that they use for their own internal discussions. And I thought that's a really good solution, because as an organizations, we develop these communication shortcuts that are just natural part of the familiarity we develop with each other. So that's just sharing that experience. I'm sure you have I'm sure there are better ideas. I'm not a communication expert, but I thought it was pretty good. The answer to Zachary's point, the logic model can reflect the organization's theory of change. But to fully reflect the theory of change, the logic model does need a little bit more thought to express how one step leads to the other. And we had like a very brief conversation about that in our team. I think that the logic model in and of itself can lay out the foundation, but definitely you need more thought for that. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mute because.
Just so you know, the next echo, the first echo, which is going to be in February after we meet again, is on theories of change. And so we really try to clarify that. We do see the logic model as something separate. But I'm wondering, I thought that Camille might have been calling out, or not calling out, but asking Explorer to share something? If you're willing.
Yeah, it was Jeanette who was bringing up the point. Jeanette, are you able to share?
Hello. Yes, sorry. I was on another work thing. Can you just repeat for me, Lauren? So sorry.
Yeah, you had brought up that really excellent point about the language for the logic model and who its audience was.
Yeah, when we were taking a glance through our logic model, the one thing we really noticed was that the wording in ours, while really concise, it was also not really language that if you were to give it to the public, or let's say we were looking at X Studios, which is guided towards teens, if you were to give it to them, they wouldn't really care about the outcome stats or the activities. The language was more based towards like partners or like grant funders or like people who would want to help us in the future because of the things that we want to achieve within Explora. And we were thinking of like, if we wanted buy-in from teenagers or for them to participate within Explora and participate within X Studio, that a logic model for them in that language and changing that language, one, we would have to approach it differently. But two, like it's something we can do to make it more applicable and approachable to them or families. So that was one of the things that we considered while doing our logic model.
All right, great. Thanks so much for sharing that. I want to give a chance for, we have a few more minutes. If anyone else wants to report back on just something you want to share, something you learned or noticed, or anything.
If I may, just because this is really interesting to me in terms of how to communicate with my community. And so I really want to thank Claire and Gaia. I'm not sure if I remember your name.
Yeah, you got it.
That just for bringing this up, because telling my community members that I have a logic model and assessment tools would be totally useless, but developing a parallel document that says, what are we trying to achieve? How will we know we're successful? What are we doing to achieve those goals could be really helpful to me.
Okay, and there's some language right there that you came up with.
Thank you. That's great. Yep. That's what we're reaching for too. And it's kind of like we, at this point, kind of have to, like we so often do, write for grant and then write for public or community consumption. It's kind of like parallel tracks in a way, or write or communicate. Yeah. Wear two different hats.
All right, great. Thanks for that. So let's go ahead and the next thing is I wanted just to share with you what's coming next, so that we're all on the same page. Okay, so what's next? So between now and our next meeting is February 10th. We'd like you to take some time, an hour and a half to 2 hours in your organization, ideally with other people, more than one person, to complete your logic model draft. And the first thing that we will do in February is just let people have questions or share in the small groups about any questions you have about the logic model. The other thing we're going to be doing next month is a Measuring What Matters with Rubrics workshop. And this is just, again, this is the second thing that we got out of the Social Profit Handbook, which we have, we are sending to all of you. It's just a great way of allowing you to measure anything, especially if you know what it looks like when you're successful. I mean, that's all you have to know. The other point I wanted just to point out in terms of scheduling is that on February 15th, that's going to be the first ECHO learning community, and the topic is theories of change. And I think that it's really helpful to have that concept as well. And then, if you wouldn't mind, we've ended with enough time for you to take our survey. You can take it on your phone. It's very brief. We would love to hear what you have to say. We always review these the coming weeks so that we can make adjustments so that this experience is as helpful as it possibly can be for you all. So if you would please take the survey, and Caitlin, if you could put the link into the, let me know if that's a problem for you, because I can pull the link if I go out of this mode. I'll do that. Should I do that, Caitlin?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah, okay, so let me just get in there and I'll put that link into the chat. Oops, that's not where the chat is. Okay, so here it comes into the chat. And as you finish up the survey, feel free to do something else, leave the meeting. And thank you to those who are hosting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll see you in February. How'd it go, everybody?
It went good. My group they were all in a different place. So somebody had one group had a really, the Explorer group had a really complete logic model from the org, but they want to do their own. So I thought that was cool. We had another one who had a logic model that they did that I think could use a little bit of work. And then the other org was brand new to it. So it was kind of a good place for everybody to see people at different learning. But yeah, went good.
Good, good. And we want to, I think we talked about that too. I'm really glad that Claudia mentioned that people will be at different levels because, someone showed this in the first share, they had a complete logic model. I'm like, where did that come from? But it was our template, but they had copied and pasted from what they had. So, so that was good. Ranjana, how was your group?
It went very well. They were different types of programs and different level, they were at different places. One program was just starting, it was just the beginning of the program. And so they were not familiar with any of this language. So that they are going to make the biggest gain. Also, the other thing that happened is that a couple of people were there for the first half, the other people came at the second half, so there was a disconnect. But I would kind of explain to them what happened before and give them resources so that they could think through things. And I encourage them to stay till the end, not feel discouraged.
Was that the SCL for New Mexico?
SCL, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm hoping that the ones that I'm hoping that they'll take the time between sessions to look over the materials, and then when they come back, they'll be hopefully it will make more sense. And I think that we talked about that last year as well, because we had some groups that were very like, I don't know, compliance, not the right word, but they were doing the program, and others that were just kind of dabbling. And we feel like that's fine. Like we want everyone to get something out of it. So Caitlin, did people